The coronavirus pandemic is shutting the stores in New York City, but the artists are moving in. The bad news can seem endless, but amidst the depression, people are trying to find solace in art.
Art is therapy, not only for us, but for people seeing it. And I mean, to see a vacant store is a sad thing, but when you can, you can celebrate that space with art, it's so important. Man. It changes your mood.
And it also brings foot traffic to the area. It helps surrounding stores that are struggling to make rent payments. It's a symbiosis of art and business. Together, they're coping with bad news in a city that desperately needs good news.
Especially now, people are saying that New York is dead and this and that, and it's not true. You know, we're still here, we're still fighting, and I think it's important to share that.
The collaboration of landlords, businesses and artists in New York shows how important it is to cling to positive things, especially in times of crises. Hello and welcome to our COVID-19 special here on DW News. I'm Monica Jones. Good to have you with us. How do you feel today? Well, these days it's not easy to find that silver lining on the horizon, right? Especially when you get bombarded with bad news day in, day out. It's time for the media to do better.
India added a record number of new coronavirus cases on Sunday.
Hundreds of elephants have been found dead in recent months, being described as a
non-stop bad news. Is the world really in such a thoroughly terrible state?
For countries in the region.
Of course, the current coronavirus pandemic is indeed an extraordinary global crisis. But if you take a longer-term view, you see there have been many positive trends. Infant mortality has never been lower. And the number of people killed in natural disasters has been averaging downwards. Still, we often get the impression things are just getting worse and worse, myself included, even though, as a journalist, I don't just consume news, but also help shape it. Why are we more sensitive to bad news? Does it have something to do with the brain? I'm on my way to see neuroscientist Maren Urner. She has researched precisely these questions.
The brain processes negative news faster, better, and more intensively than positive or neutral news. We also remember it better. In terms of evolutionary biology, processing negative information better than positive information has been helpful. Because in the age of the saber-toothed tiger and woolly mammoth, missing a piece of bad news might well mean that's it for you.
Studies have shown that test subjects from different parts of the world became more excited and alert as soon as they were shown bad news, regardless of their location and culture. Many media outlets use this effect to their advantage. Negative headlines sell more copies and get more clicks. Studies show that the media are publishing more and more bad news, especially online. Is it a problem if the media revel in bad news?
First and foremost, it makes us all have negative expectations. So we go through life with a worldview in which we assume the world is worse than it really is.
The impact of media reports can be extremely strong. Take the Boston Marathon bomb attack in 2013, for example. Some people who followed the news obsessively were more stressed and frightened than others who had been physically present. So what does this mean?
First of all, it makes people less likely to take action. You might think the realization that we all have a worldview that's too negative would actually prompt people to become more active. But many psychological studies have shown that that is precisely not the case. What's more, it can promote chronic stress. We know that chronic stress can be a factor in many diseases, including diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and mental illnesses such as depression.
The coronavirus pandemic is a good example. After months of bad news, many people have grown weary of the crisis. They feel helpless and wish things would go back to normal. As a journalist, I have to consider whether I might be contributing to other people having a misguided view of the world. What can the media do better?
Well, that's the big question. Let's bring in Ulrik Hagerup, founder and CEO of the Constructive Institute Journalism for Tomorrow in Denmark. Good to have you with us. How do you cope with all the bad news?
I try to see the world and my news with both eyes, both looking for the problems, but also for the nuances and the hope, the problem and the way forward.
Now, not everybody is capable of doing it, and we certainly learned that bad news sell better than good news. It seems in the media then it's all down to profit. What could prompt media outlets to take a different approach here?
To understand that is a big misunderstanding. The American calls it, if it bleeds, it leads. It turns out not to be true. If you ask people on the street in Berlin or elsewhere in the world, do you need more news? Do you need faster news? They will most likely say, no, I'm drowning in it. But I need something. I need something to trust. I do need journalism, but I need journalism that is passionate, but also give me a full picture of the world. That is what people want. They want not more information, but they need navigation, stories about where we are, where we come from, but especially moving ahead. So the idea that it's only fear that we should tap into, and that we've been doing in the news industry for years. We're tapping people on the shoulder. There's breaking news here. Something bad might happen here, and a falling tree in Indonesia. Everything is going to hell. Watch here. That has been our strategy. And it has turned out that people turn their back on us. They are overwhelmed and they don't want to pay for it. So if we think about it, we should listen to psychologists who say, yes, fear is very strong. And as you said, it comes down from the Stone Age. But hope is bigger. That's the reason why people get up every morning. And we should remember that. Talk into that.
Absolutely, but we still have to, obviously, it's a journalist's job to report the truth, and the truth isn't always beautiful.
Yes.
And sadly, a lot of bad things happen in the world. So how can you, as a responsible journalist, strike the right balance, reporting the truth, but not adding to people's anxiety?
Yeah, and we should not give people false hope. Our job is not to put a smile on people's faces. We are in the information, the trust business, and we should remember that. But we should see both the problems, and then we should take one step further. Instead of just looking for another story, another problem we can tap people on the shoulder with, say, you also have to watch this. This could also be dangerous. We should stick to the problem and ask the constructive questions, pointing to the future, asking now what and how. If we have a problem, what have other countries done that we can learn from? That changes the conversation, that changes the perspective.
Offer solutions, give people a helping hand. And with half a minute to go, is there anything positive in this current crisis, the pandemic, that we as journalists can take away from?
There's a lot. One of them, for me, I don't have to spend 2 days going to Berlin to talk to you for 5 minutes. I could stay here. We have learned more and more to do that also in meeting in the business world. We have learned a lot of things. In Denmark, for instance, we should know, but people don't know, that less people have died in Denmark in 2020 than in the last 10 years every year. Why? Because people don't get the flu.
All right. Well, that's good news indeed. Ulrik Hagerup, there, founder and CEO of the Constructive Institute Journalism for Tomorrow. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, time now for your questions. Over to our science correspondent, Derek Williams.
How are we supposed to deal with coronavirus fatigue when restrictions are being reimposed?
This isn't a science question, it's a personal one, but pandemic fatigue is affecting so many people all over the world that I wanted to spend a couple of minutes sharing my own thoughts on it. Here in Germany, where it gets dark and cold in the winter, a lot of people are really dreading the next few months, even though compared to many other European countries, things are are actually going pretty well here so far, but it feels like they're balanced on the edge of a knife, and it wouldn't take much to tip the scales and slide the country into some pretty dark territory. So for me at least, in addition to just being heartily sick of pandemic restrictions, there's also an underlying layer of fear that never really goes away. And getting through the next few months will be easier if I can lessen it. What helps me personally keep my fear somewhat at bay is focusing on the science, which is not to say that it provides crystal clear answers all the time. Science is messy, and what it seems to be saying can often change over time. Just look at what it now says about mask wearing, for example, compared to a year ago. But the fact that ideas can change based on new evidence is not a weakness. It's actually science's great strength. And look at how far it's brought us. Less than a year after the first reported cases of this sometimes deadly, fast-spreading disease, what we've learned about treating it has steadily lowered fatality rates among those who catch it. And there's a good possibility we'll see large-scale vaccination against COVID-19 next year. And that's amazing because it shows we aren't helpless, even if we are afraid and exhausted by the whole pandemic thing. I at least am now hopeful that if we can only hold out for a few more months, things will look different in 2021. In a nutshell, I battle my own pandemic fatigue by reminding myself of how far we've already come, and with hope for where I think we're going to be in the not too distant future.